Yes, the second panelist is Dr. Innocent Nahawe, the proprietor, Galaxy FM. You're very welcome on this panel today. I'll also invite Solomon Serwanja, a renowned journalist, specifically investigative journalist, to also take his seat as one of our panelists today. Mr. Joseph Chigozi, the Deputy Executive Director, Next Media Services. In that order, you're welcome to take your seat anywhere you feel comfortable. And lastly, to also strike a balance on the panel today is also to have the Honorable Minister for Science, Technology and Innovations, the Honorable Dr. Monica Musenero. You're welcome. I can also take this opportunity to encourage everyone outside that would want to listen in, but also engage with our panelists today to also get into the pavilion so that we can commence the discussions without wasting any more time. The journalists, I know we were supposed to be having a press conference outside at the press lounge, but you can use this opportunity to also capture some of the moments. The fact that this day has been dedicated to you, the press and media in general, to capture some of these moments, but also if you feel like you need to interact on some of the key issues that are going to be discussed on the panel today, you can use that opportunity also to not lag behind, but follow the conversation all the way through. This panel is going to be discussing particularly the role of media in promoting science, technology and innovation in Uganda. Before we go into panel discussions, we shall have a trigger, which is normally referred to as the keynote address from Dr. Charles Wendo. I'll invite Dr. Charles Wendo to come on the podium to deliver that address that will trigger us into the panel discussions. Dr. Charles Wendo is a veterinary doctor, a scientist, or rather a science journalist, a trainer in science journalism, but also science communications. You're welcome.
Right, we are talking about science and technology. The Honorable Minister, distinguished colleagues, senior colleagues in the media, investors present, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about the role of the media in promoting indigenous innovation. My name is Charles Wendo. I'll spend only about 15 minutes trying to connect the dots, bringing the media, society, and innovation. And as we wait for the technological issues to be sorted out, I could start talking about this, that there is hardly anything that you can do to inform the public without using the media. But I can start by telling my own personal story. I was introduced as a veterinary doctor and a journalist at the same time. So you might ask the question, how does a veterinary doctor become a journalist? The Honorable Minister was my lecturer. Honorable, you did a good job. And as I was about to complete my course in my 4th year, I was left with 1 year to complete the course. I was supposed to carry out a scientific research project as part of the requirements to get a bachelor's degree of veterinary medicine. And then I saw a picture. At that time, we had a waterweed called water hyacinth that covered most of Lake Victoria. And it doesn't matter whether you just loved eating fish, or you loved going to the beach, or you frequently traveled through the lake, one way or another, you were affected. This waterweed covered 80% of Lake Victoria, and it was a nightmare. So in the middle of this, I saw a picture of a pig eating water hyacinth, and I said, wow, so this weed that we are all looking at as a problem, as a big inconvenience, can actually be used as an animal feed. But being the scientist in the making, I had to ask the question, what is the feeding value of water hyacinth for pigs? Is it good anyway? Is it safe for pigs to eat? Is it nutritious? And so on and so on. So I set out to carry out that study. And then in science, before you carry out a research study, actually as part of the research study, you are supposed to do a literature review, reading up what other researchers have done and found out on the topic that you are going to research on. So I did my literature review. We didn't have Mr. Google, don't ask me how I did my literature review. I did my literature review, found out about a lot of the studies that had been done in Latin America, in Southeast Asia, about the potential feeding value of water hyacinth. But then, unfortunately, the money available was not enough to carry out this study. So what did I do then? I abandoned the literature. No, I didn't abandon it. I put it aside, the literature that I had collected, and then I carried out another study that was affordable, and then I graduated. Soon after graduating, I got a job with the University of Berlin. They had a field research project in Rukunjiri to study tick-borne diseases. And then, before I worked with them for 1 year, they left the country. So the following day after they left the country, I was job-free, not jobless. I hope we all know the difference between jobless and job-free. I was job-free. Then I went back to the information that I'd gathered on water hyacinth. I reviewed it, I wrote an article, and then I took that article to the New Vision to be published. I'd never been to New Vision before. I didn't know anyone at New Vision. I walked in with my article, went to the reception. I was referred to the editor in charge, the features editor at that time. I submitted my article, and it was published almost immediately. Now, I like to tell this story for a purpose. I tell this story for a purpose. Many times we say that the media are not interested in science. That is not true. Many times the scientists relax and say, the media are not interested in science. That is not true. But also many times we as journalists, we say our editors are not interested in science. And again, that is not true. It's about knowing the science that the editors are interested in. At that time, that article was published immediately for a few reasons. One, it was addressing a problem that many people were concerned about at that time. Secondly, it was proposing an actual solution to the problem that people were facing at that time. And then thirdly, I wrote it in words that you didn't have to be a scientist to understand it. So it is not true that the media are not interested in science. It's not true that editors are not interested in science. It's just that sometimes we confront them with a topic that is not of interest to the public at that point in time. And sometimes we confront them with the information that is written in words that they themselves cannot understand. So if I am the editor and I cannot understand what you present me with, then how can I present it to my audiences? So that is the purpose for which I tell that story. So the take-home message for us is, it's not true that the media are not interested in science. It's not true that editors are not interested in science. It's about writing the right story at the right time and in the right language, which I call the language of the people. Now, at this point, I get the impression that it might take us a bit longer to sort out the technology issue, and I would propose that I would have the laptop back, and it will work. It will work without the projection. Okay. Please bear with us for a moment as the laptop travels back. Oh, okay, great. Okay, thank you very much for that technology. Let's scroll to the next 2 slides ahead of that. Yes, that was just my explanation on why the editors liked the story. Next. Yes, I thought I should project that. I thought I should explain that. We are going to discuss the role of the media. The role of the media in promoting innovations. But in the first place, why do the media exist, and why do we as journalists report stories in the media? Now, there are many explanations as to why we write stories in the media, as to what the purpose of journalism is. But the one that I liked most is put forward by the American Press Institute. And they say that the main purpose of journalism is to provide audiences with verified information so that they can use this information to make informed decisions. And I highlight a few of the keywords. Verified information. We have all sorts of content creators. Anyone can post anything online. But what is the difference between a journalist and anyone else who posts anything online? Journalism is supposed to go through a process of verification. Verification. That is what makes the difference between journalism, between journalists and everyone else who posts information online. Verification. And then we give them that information so that they can use that information to make informed decisions. Again, I emphasize that word, use of information. Why do we write these stories? Why do we write the stories? Every story that we write must have a purpose. Someone out there should be able to use that information for something. Otherwise, we begin to become irrelevant as journalists. So we must write stories that people are able to use to make a decision. It may be a policymaker that needs that decision, that information to make a decision. It may be a regulator that needs that information. It may be members of the public that need that information to make decisions at a personal level. So someone must be able to use that information. Otherwise, we become irrelevant as journalists. And then that information should be able to help someone to make a decision. Am I a farmer trying to plant bananas and you're reporting about a scientist who has discovered that bananas planted in rectangular holes perform better than bananas grown in square holes, rather in round holes? Whatever it is, that information that is put in the media, in the stories, must help someone out there to make a decision. All right, let's look at the next slide. Again, what is science and what is innovation? I picked this definition from the UK Science Council, and again, academicians might be wanting to ask me the question, why did I pick this particular definition and not all the other definitions of science? I like this, it is very practical. Science is the pursuit and application of knowledge and understanding of the natural and social world following a systematic methodology based on evidence. Again, if we are going to report on science and technology, evidence, we can't, these are some of the keywords I'm going to highlight. In science and technology, we can't run away from evidence. Evidence is the foundation of science and technology. If someone tells you they have come up with an innovation, be it a medicine for this and that, be it a device that repels rats, be it a device that repels mosquitoes, be it a new test for anything, where is the evidence? Science goes through a process of proving something, and we cannot survive without evidence. Now, innovation, what is innovation? Again, that chart summarizes it, but it's basically a process to create new ideas or to improve old ideas and test them. So there has to be a thinking process. What is the problem that I'm going to solve? What is the problem that is facing society that we need to solve? And then you think through it and come up with solutions. You come up with an idea that is going to solve this problem, and then try it out and then refine. When you try it out, you see what's working, what's not working, and then you refine. So an innovation has to go through this process. Let's look at the next slide. Yes, why do journalists report news? I'm not asking you to give me the answers right now. If we had more time, we would engage in a very useful discussion around that. But for now, just reflect on it. Why do journalists report news? And why do scientists or anyone else who creates innovations, why do they engage in that innovation? And I ask those questions for a purpose. Let's look at the next slide. Now, quite often there's a disconnect between journalists and researchers. Now, from where I stand, I am a scientist, I am a journalist, and now I'm a trainer of both sides. I train scientists to communicate, I train journalists to report science. And I can very clearly see that there is no serious difference between journalists and scientists. Many times we are all interested in the same thing. We just need to understand each other better. It's a bit like a young man with his young wife. They are thinking one of them wants to practice birth control, family planning, whatever it's called, and is fearing that the spouse, the partner might object. The other one is thinking about the same thing and is thinking the partner might object. But when the two discuss, they eventually begin to realize that maybe they actually have common interests. They all want to do the same thing, but they are fearing each other. Now, that happens a lot between journalists and scientists. Now, many times the organization I work with, and I didn't say a bit about the organization in the beginning. The organization I work with, many times we organize what we call speed dating between journalists and researchers. And it's very interesting. Before they come into the room, the scientists are very suspicious of the journalists. And then the journalists are very suspicious of the researchers. Then we bring them into a room and we give every researcher 5 minutes with the journalist, and then the bell goes, and then you have to move to the next one. And usually they all come out very excited. The scientist will tell you, oh, I didn't know that journalists are actually interested in reporting things that help society. And then the journalist will tell you, oh, I didn't know that these researchers have so many interesting research findings. So it's usual about the important thing is to get together. Can we start talking to each other more than we've done in the past? Now, these are the similarities. One, they both work to make society a better place. Do we have any scientist in the room that can tell me their work, their research, or any form of scientific work or innovation is not meant to make society a better place? Hands up, any scientists? Oh, I thought your hand was up. Okay. Okay, journalists in the room, hands up, any journalist who will tell me that their intention, their work is not meant to make society a better place. Hands up. Okay, all hands are down. So we agree that both journalists and scientists are trying to make society a better place. Secondly, they are both curious. All the work around science and innovation begins with curiosity. You make an observation, then you ask yourself a few questions about that observation, and then you begin to look for answers, and you come up with a tentative solution, and then or tentative findings which has to be tested out. Now, that is in the field of science. In the field of journalism, what do? We come up with an observation again. Because of our curiosity, we ask some questions around that observation. Then we go out to look for the answers, and we come back with the answers, and we package the story. So what then happens is that there's a difference there between the researchers and journalists, between the scientists and journalists, because the scientist will ask the question today and go through a very long process of finding the answers. The journalist will ask the question now, and by evening or by tomorrow morning, the answers are there and they are writing their story. So it's the speed at which we work differs. The details of how we work differs, but ultimately it's the same thing. We are all curious. We all go out to actively seek information, and then at the end of the day, you have to report the findings. In science, they will tell you publish or perish. Now, is there a journalist who will tell me that doesn't apply to journalists as well? Publish or perish? So in journalism, in science, you publish or perish. And then our work is subject to scrutiny. We publish stories in the media every day. That work is available for public scrutiny. I can tell you the many years when I was an editor, one of the things that kept me busy on the day that my publication would come out was phone calls, from people who are responding to the stories that we published in the media. Some are disagreeing, some are approving of your stories, others are disagreeing, others are trying to dispute the facts, others are not even disputing any facts, but they don't just like the fact that you published this story, and so on and so on. So we subject ourselves to public scrutiny. That's why we get all of this feedback. Again, in science, we write an academic paper, publish in a journal. Again, it is subject to scrutiny. So we have a lot of similarities between the media and between scientists and journalists. We just need to talk to each other more and more so that we can have more stories about innovations in the media. Again, this chart summarizes the relationship between the media, between science, the media, and society. Top right, you have the scientists. They carry out scientific research, they engage in innovation, but I can tell you, most of us don't read these scientific journals where these scientists publish their information. So until now, not only in Uganda, not only in Africa, the whole world, until now, the main source of information for the public and for policymakers on science and innovation including scientific research, is the media. So we need to get these stories published in the media so that the public and the policymakers can get to know about them. So scientists carry out research, they come up with knowledge or with innovations, and then this can only get to the public and the policymakers mostly through the media. Then the public and the policymakers can then use this information to make informed decisions, and then at the end of the day they can give feedback to the scientists that came up with this innovation. So that relationship is very important for all of us to pay attention to and to be aware of. Let's look at the next slide. Yes, as we come towards the end, I want to mention a few things about the future of journalism, but at the end of the day, I want to ask the question. If this is the future of journalism, discussed from the perspective of the challenges facing the media at the moment, does reporting on innovations have any role in alleviating or mitigating some of these challenges that the media are facing at the moment? One, the news media will create content. They will continue to create content. But other digital platforms like Google, Facebook, and so on will control access to the audiences. Gone are the days when New Vision would publish a story and the only way the public would know about it is to buy a copy of New Vision. And gone are the days when you had to tune to NBS, NTV to know what has been aired. These days, the media organization will create the content. Most of the people will know about this through WhatsApp, through Facebook, through Google, and not necessarily by coming to the media organization. So that has challenges for the media, because advertisers that would normally advertise with this media organization, with NTV, with the New Vision, they will then say that, look, if people are accessing this information through Facebook, should I not then take my advert to Facebook and not to New Vision and not to NBS? So that is a challenge that we face in the media. Number two, people will have access to more diverse sources of information. So we then end up with a situation where we are competing for attention. Then number three, journalism will often be on the losing the battle for attention and trust. And many people will no longer be interested in the news. I face this with my own son. I tell him, hey, look, you need to watch TV, you need to do this. Something important might be happening, it's reported in the news, and you don't know about it. And he tells me, no, Daddy, if it's so important, one of my friends will share it in one of the WhatsApp groups. So there's that competition for attention that we are facing. And unfortunately, it has gone to the next level. There is now something called news avoidance. News avoidance. There are people who are now deliberately beginning to avoid the news. And one of the reasons news avoidance is happening, there are people that are scholars that are carrying out research on news avoidance, trying to find out what is going on, why is it happening, how can it be reversed, and so on. And one of the things they are finding is that, one, many of them think the media are obsessed with negativity. You know, you wake up, you know, you already have a problem you're facing, you go to this newspaper, you find bad news, you tune this TV station, bad news, and so on. So people say that the media are depressing them with bad news. That is one of the reasons for news avoidance. And the other reason, okay, there are many reasons, but due to time, we can't go into all of them. Let's look at trend number 4. The media will be facing a tougher business environment because of what I explained earlier. And this is going to lead to cost cutting, and cost cutting as we speak now is already happening. And then number five, which is most important, amid all these challenges, media media are becoming more innovative. And the media organizations, my apologies about the noise, not much I can do about it. The media organizations that are going to innovate are going to thrive, and the ones that don't innovate might die. So what are the implications for the media? The media need to report stories that are more accessible, as in they need to find the audiences where they are. Timely, so that the stories are addressing the things that are people are concerned with or concerned about at that particular time. The stories also need to be informative. And then, above all, we need to do journalism that serves the people. Remember, as we discussed earlier, people have choices. They can go to WhatsApp, they can go to this and that and the other. We are facing that competition. So the more we do journalism that serves the people, the more we will retain our audiences. And the reason I've explained all of this is that as we face this competition, as the media environment becomes tougher, we ourselves need to innovate. And I hope that in next year's Science Week, we have a display of innovations. I know the media, there are a lot of innovations in the media. So I think in the next Science Week, Honorable Minister, I do hope to see innovations in the media also exhibited here. So yes, we need to be more innovative, that's one, but also we need to do more reporting of innovations, because these innovations, by their very nature, they are meant to solve problems that people are facing on a day-to-day basis. And I can tell you, the more we report about solutions to the problems that people are facing on a day-to-day basis, the more people are likely to read or to watch or to listen to our content. All right, so this is the current status. I don't want to dwell much on that, but I just wanted to mention that there's literal science in the media as we speak now, not only in Uganda, all over Africa, but there is also mostly coverage of common events. My own study showed that the science stories that are in the media are coming mostly from common events, and very little of enterprise journalism in enterprise science journalism in the media. And then if you analyze who is speaking in the stories that are reported, it's mostly official statements. And then there's very little contextual reporting. I think in the media we say that someone can report that it's raining, and another one will report on what are the implications of that rain and what we need to do about it. So yes, contextual reporting matters a lot. Okay, let's slide on to the next slides. And just some very quick tips. These are things that many people in this room would know, but no harm to mention them again, that it's important if we are going to report about innovations, we need to build rapport with scientists, so indeed with anyone else engaged with innovations. There may be real scientists, there may be citizen scientists, there may be anyone else engaged with innovations. We need to build rapport and understand each other's side of the coin. Otherwise, we end up with a situation where we are just criticizing each other. The scientists have a lot of criticisms against journalists that we don't have time to discuss here. But also the journalists have a lot of criticisms against the scientists that we don't have time to discuss here. But can we talk together more often and understand each other's side of the story? Accuracy is key. I normally tell people that if a surgeon, carrying out a surgical operation makes a mistake, that mistake is going to kill one person. If the media publish something that is false, it can kill or affect millions of people one way or another. So accuracy of the information is very important, but also if we are reporting about science and innovation, we need to report what I call in the language of the people. We need to use words that the people will understand. Many times I participated as a judge in I can't remember which year that was, could have been 2017, Uganda Biosafety Journalism Awards. And I was reviewing the articles that were submitted for these awards. And believe me, some of the articles appeared like something that is written to be published in a scientific journal, you know, in very complicated language. Then you begin to wonder, did this journalist actually understand what they were writing, and did their editor understand? Because if I am a scientist, I'm a scientist and I'm struggling to understand some of these things. What about people out there who are not scientists? What about people out there who have not even gone to university? Maybe they're educated up to P7, up to senior 4. So that is very important. We must report science and innovation in words that people will be able to understand. And then we have to report science stories that matter to people. It's very easy to be ignored by talking things that don't matter to people. That can happen to us in the media. If we report things that don't matter to people, if we report things that are not of interest to the public and to policymakers, it's very, very easy to be ignored. And again, it needs to be informative. We need to provide useful information to our audiences as we report these stories. And of course, the stories have to be well structured. Now, this is not a criticism of the media, but believe me, you will walk into a newsroom and you ask someone about, now this is jargon our jargon in the media, nut graph. You will walk into a newsroom and ask someone what a nut graph is. And don't be surprised if you are finding journalists in a newsroom and have totally no idea what you are talking about when you talk about the nut graph. So it's important that our stories that we publish are well structured, a good beginning, a very informative body, and ending that keeps someone thinking about the stories that we publish. And of course, quite often I talk about this. You find a lot of media organizations, they just pick a foreign story and publish as it is. Now, this story was written by a journalist somewhere, maybe in Europe, maybe in USA, focusing on the aspects of that story that they are interested in, written in a way that serves their interests. And then what do we do? We pick this story and publish as is. I know that a lot of editors have made efforts to localize these stories, but I also know that some editors just pick these stories and publish. Now, that is something that we should normally not do, because we have our audiences to serve, we have our interests as a country, and something that was edited or written by someone in another continent is not necessarily exactly serving our interest. There must be another angle to the story. Can we add local voices? Can we introduce new facts that are of interest to the people here? And so on and so on. And then finally on this slide, in science, I describe the process of innovation. You ask a few questions, you observe a problem here and there, you think, how are we going to solve this problem, and so on. So in the end, when you are testing your innovation, you are going to do some kind of experiment, most likely. And in science, we say that even a failed experiment is a success. There is no experiment that will not give you information that is going to be useful in another study. So if we had, the very first HIV vaccine trial that took place in Uganda about 20 years ago, I reported on that. And there was a candidate vaccine. They called it a candidate vaccine because they thought this might be a vaccine, but there was no evidence. So they carried out that research here in Uganda to try and see, might this be a vaccine or not. In the end, that was not a vaccine. It didn't work, but that was not a failure. A failed experiment is a success. And when we report about these experiments, we need to report them in that context, because the information that came out of that experiment was useful in designing the current vaccines that are being tested. All right, and some very quick tips for scientists. It's important to build rapport. I already talked about that. Build rapport with the media. It's important to speak the language of the people. Again, I explained that we have to speak things that people will understand. And then we need to communicate information that people can relate with, otherwise they can ignore us. And then we need to know when to release this information. When do we release this information, and how much of it do we release? Because as people who carry out research, we have lots of information, but we can't bombard the public with all that information. We need to decide strategically what is the information that needs to be released to the public. And again, we need to be proactive about this, because we should not be, as scientists, we should not be spectators. You know, we should not look on. There's a lot of information in the scientific world that needs to go out to the public. Let's be proactive. Let's send this information out there. Now, many scientists will speak to the media only when they're approached by a journalist. Now, by the time a journalist is approaching you for your comment on an issue, sometimes it may be a story that the journalist is reporting on out of a problem that is observed somewhere. Now, if all our time as scientists is responding to queries on problem, if we spend all our time responding to queries on problems, then if you analyze what's in the media, you find that our names are more present on stories that have problems than stories that are positive. Now, what then begins to happen is we are doing a lot of important scientific work, but then our names begin to be associated with the problems. So let us be strategic. We release information as much as possible, as much as is necessary, so that we are not becoming spectators. We participate in setting the agenda. And then we need to find the people where they are. I want to release information, but these people, where do they get their news? Do they get their news from TV? Do they get their news from WhatsApp? Do they get their news from Facebook or from TikTok? Let's find them there. And then we need to listen to feedback. And at the end of the day, we need to evaluate our success. Now, sometimes, I can't remember who said this, that the only bad publicity is no publicity at all. In other words, even a story that we might perceive as negative might actually yield something positive. So before we conclude that this was bad for us, we need to do a bit of evaluation, and are we succeeding or not succeeding in our communication? All right, so let's look at the next slide. I think we are coming to an end. Yes, we are coming to an end. I just wanted to point you to these resources, and we can find ways of sharing this to, you can't write down all this now, but we need to find ways of sharing this. Most of these resources were created by me working with a few other people in the organization that I work with called SciDevNet, which is called Science for Development Network, which is based in the UK, but focusing mostly on the global south, from Latin America up to Asia and the Pacific. Now, there's a free ebook which I really would encourage all of the journalists here to read, and even the scientists. A lot of scientists are telling me they have read this book and they have found it useful. The book is titled Science Communication Skills for Journalists, a resource book for universities in Africa. Now, the other resource I would refer you to is the free online course, Science Communication Skills for Journalists. The link is embedded in there. And then the other one is a practical guide, which again, written by me, which is how to become a star science journalist from scratch. And then there's another one, where to find a science story. Our starting point there was, many times journalists will ask you that, what can I write about in science? Can you give me story ideas? And that article is full of story ideas on how you can where to find a science story, how to get the story idea, and where to find the information. And then how to report scientific research findings. I mentioned earlier that science and innovation is based on evidence. And what is that evidence? That evidence is usually published by the scientists in a scientific or in an academic journal. So how can a journalist find news from these papers that scientists publish in academic journals? And then finally, one set of resources for scientists. Okay. Media skills for scientists. Again, that's a free online course that I put together with a few people to guide scientists on how they can communicate. And then how to find the right journalist to report on your research. That's a free practical guide. Again, it's available online. How to give a science talk anywhere, or how to talk about your science. Many scientists have that problem. They ask you, but if I'm talking to people who cannot understand, who are not scientists, how can I explain my science to them? That resource can help them. And then how do we use social media to communicate research? And then finally, how to brief policymakers on science issues. So I would like to bring the presentation to an end at this point, and the floor is going to be opened for my senior colleagues in the media.
Well, thank you very much. A round of applause for Dr. Charles Owendo for that amazing presentation. I'd rather refer to it as a lecture. It gives me memories of back to school, back into my journalism school. I apologize, I didn't actually introduce myself. My name is Elijah Tuliogumanoe. I'm also a journalist, and I'm the Strategic Communications Officer at the Secretariat of Science, Technology, and Innovations. Thank you very much. Another round of applause for Dr. Charles Owendo for that amazing presentation. We shall be opening the discussion now, and I will first of all request my panelists to make sure that their microphones are off when they're not speaking, because it gives us the bad feedback. But right away, without taking more of the panelists' time, and I apologize, I want to apologize first openly for taking or eating into your time. I know you had several other schedules. These are high-profile people in the media sector in Uganda, and of course their schedules should be very, very busy. I apologize for, I know the rain did disturb us a little bit, but in Africa we call that a blessing. I'll invite the Honorable Minister for Science, Technology, and Innovations, Honorable Dr. Monica Musenero, to kickstart this panel. And each panelist will be having a maximum of, I do not want to limit my, my boss, the Honorable Minister, by allocating time to her, but at least 10 minutes to give the background of this panel. We're discussing the role of media in promoting science, technology, and innovations in Uganda particularly. As the panel opens, we use as little time as we can to make our point, to drive our point home. Thank you. Honorable Minister, you're welcome.
Thank you, Elijah, and thank you very much, Dr. Owendo, for that presentation. But I want to calm everybody that I will not talk for 10 minutes. Otherwise, I will be dominating the entire panel. So it was very intriguing to listen to Dr. Owendo. It's like he has one leg in hot water and one leg in cold water, and is trying to give us the average. So we want to thank you for trying to navigate that space. I think in response to that presentation, I just want to present what I perceive as our needs as scientists, especially at this time in Uganda. And this goes for the rest of Africa. One, we are in an environment where science is relatively new. And there is a certain type of science which has been known. but specifically science and innovations that are going to lead to industry, is quite new in our ecosystem. And so we have 5 areas of interest. The first is we need the media to help us to create awareness. But we also need the media to help us to create understanding of the things that we are doing. And I guess in the keynote presentation, you try to give us hints on how we can build that rapport so that there is understanding. And for me, this is not unusual because this is really beginning, where there's a certain version of science that we've been reporting. I worked for a long time in the Ministry of Health, and I dealt a lot with journalists, especially in the area of epidemics. And I persuaded my bosses then in the Ministry of Health that we should always have an interaction, and if with the media, explain to them the terms. So the words, because one time I was leading response to a particular outbreak, and the story which came out is that there is this bacteria. Now for them, being scientists, they knew the difference between a virus and a bacteria was very, very important. But the journalist doesn't know the difference between a bacteria and a virus. And so the inaccuracies caused a wide, division, and it was a small thing. So what we need from our friends in the media, we need them to help us to create awareness and understanding. And that means that we need to interact, and you have emphasized that. The second issue is we need, in the communication that goes out, it is important that the way communication is packaged, it builds trust. Because when the story focuses on building mistrust between the scientists and the public, then it becomes very difficult for us later to put a product coming out of it to the public, because they will keep going back and asking, isn't that the thing which had this? And sometimes, so how do we build trust through the media? And the other related part is, in some instances, and in many instances, scientists need to communicate partially for their own protection. Sometimes we cannot communicate everything fully for either protection of the ideas or for protection of the individual. Many of us may not have followed these ideas, but there are very many stories when scientists are taken out because what they are researching on has bigger interests than them bringing out. And these stories are all over where scientists working on particular things. So there are sometimes certain areas where we want to create awareness, but we don't want to go into identity or identifying who is doing this. The third area is many of the innovations will end up looking for investment. Now, if an area somehow is kind of discredited in media, when the investors are looking at this because there was a reporting which was not accurate about this innovation, then the investors are not going to have the confidence to put money into this. And so whatever we are putting out there has a very, very wide implication. And we're also building partnerships and collaborations. Some of them are very delicate to navigate. And sometimes when we are reluctant with information, our media friends take it as hiding something. But it is necessary for building certain delicate relationships to bring this innovation. And lastly, the destiny of any science which is going to build the economy is the market. If we are working on a vaccine which is going to end up on the market, but then there is so much negative reporting, it doesn't matter what that negative reporting is. It could be about the minister associated with this, or it could be about a certain process, like there has been a lot of talk about rats, and now in the end, when finally this product is going to the market, trust issues with the public are going to arise. So we need to discuss how do we handle a science communication now with the future in mind, because for all of us, especially as Ugandans, building the economy is important. And so these are some issues I thought I would throw there as my colleague panelists are coming. They are all mostly on the other side, apart from, I think even there's another scientist in there. So we want to dialogue and build rapport and understand each other's concerns so that we have communication that can support indigenous innovations to access market during the process, to access funding without too many questions. And sometimes most of the information is not accurate because we have not interacted in a meaningful way, but the information is negatively out there. And Dr. Wenda and fellow panelists, you'll help me. What is it that is the obsession with media about negativity? Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. A round of applause for the Honorable Minister for Science, Technology and Innovation. I think she really did drive the point home, and she has more questions than answers. I hope our guest panelists here will be able to respond and rather provide answers to some of those key questions in regards to communicating science, technology and innovation in Uganda particularly. And without taking more time, I'll first of all reintroduce the panel today. Our guest panelists, of course, Amora is with the Honorable Minister for Science, Technology and Innovation. At the extreme end is Mr. Joseph Chigozi, the Deputy Executive Director, Chief Executive Director at Next Media, and Maurice Mujisha, our second panelist. He is the Deputy Managing Director at UBC. And we have Dr. Innocent Nahawe, who is the proprietor at Galaxy FM, and Solomon Serwanja, a renowned journalist, investigative journalist to be very particular, and of course Dr. Charles Wendo here, who just gave an amazing keynote address. Without taking more of your time, let's get into this panel discussion. And I do not have any particular order, but I will particularly start with at the extreme end, such that I do not look biased in any way that I started with any particular individual. Mr. Joseph Chigozi, you will start by offering your insights on how best to promote science, technology, and innovation in Uganda, particularly. Everything is made in Uganda, everything is indigenous. I am indigenous myself, as you can tell from the accent. It's totally a Ugandan accent. You're welcome, Mr. Joseph Chigozi.
Thank you, Elijah. Of course, Honorable Minister, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to share a stage with you. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I know that we've run out of time. My name is Joe Chigozi, like I've been introduced. I'm the Deputy Group CEO for Next Media. And my job is to look at strategy for the group. But to be honest with you, the media, what we sell is time. So I'll be very brief because the most prized asset is time. And I believe that every innovation has time to wait. So I'll delve into what I think the role of the media is. But before I do that, I think the Honorable Minister asked a question, why is there so much negativity? It's a question that everyone will be asking themselves. I think it's deeply rooted, in my opinion, in the society we live in. Journalists come from a society. They are groomed by parents, they are groomed in homes. The CEOs are human beings. And that's how the negativity, in my opinion, comes about. Is it right? Certainly not. Is it relevant? Certainly not. I think we have to be deliberate as the media where I come from, our vision is to inform, to transform. So we keep asking our journalists every day, is that story going to transform your community? Is it going to transform Uganda? That is the mantra. But sometimes when there's a lot of negativity in the media, we always look at mainstream media. Charles talked about something very important. The media we know is not the media today. The media has drastically changed. Some of the bad negative stories you see are not from the mainstream media. It's actually from citizen journalism. The gatekeeping process has been skipped. The accuracy has been skipped. It is about who breaks the story first. And because technology has enabled everyone to become a journalist or to own a media house, the narrative is being shaped. That the media is simply negative. So it's important to know that there is a paradigm shift from traditional media to new media. So if I am to communicate today, if you think about the war in Israel today, on TikTok, you can actually get to know what is happening. The platforms have changed. How many TikTokers are in this room? There may be very few or none. But the young people we target, the 77% are on TikTok. So when Elijah and his team are designing strategy for media, they should rethink who is going to report the story and how are they going to do it. Of course, you cannot run away from mainstream media because of the values that are espoused in the ethics and integrity. The information is the same, content creation is the same. Probably it has changed because content is created by other people other than mainstream media. So, but the platforms have drastically changed. It's not business as usual. So as we tackle this issue of reporting about innovation and science, we need to think about that. So the role of the media cannot be underplayed. I want to be very brief. My point is simple. There has to be a mindset change. A mindset change. Who drives mindset? The media. So we need to have dialogue with whoever cares to be part of the media fraternity. If Uganda is to go to the next level, what we communicate to our children, to the world, is going to be the most important thing. If someone in Uganda has created an innovation and our first stance is negativity, as a country, we are doomed. Countries that have used the media well have excelled. I can tell you, in the other field, football. People always talked about England as being the best country in the world. Not true. They only talk about 3 World Wars and 1 World Cup. Germany has won 5, Brazil has won probably 7, but the English were very deliberate. And guess what? They have sold us the English Premier League, and it's what we watch every weekend. The program of the weekend is the English Premier League. Because they were deliberate on the way they communicated. It is as simple as that. When you talk about football, it's probably more football in Brazil and Germany and Spain, but these guys have sold their country very well. And it's the media. So the mindset I'm talking about, I've related it to football because I love football. And all of you love football, I know. My point is, we must be deliberate as media to change that mindset. If that example is not enough, I can give many more. As I wind up, there is AI and technology that is completely changing the landscape. Sometimes the story that right here can be done in 3 minutes on your phone. That, a team of panelists sat today and this is what they said. Charles talked about this in 2 minutes. Yeah. Do I need a journalist? Really? But is that information, what information is on AI? What does it portray? Does it portray the content we are talking about? Of course, yes and no. But the speed at which content is going out is interesting. So last but not least, we need to shape the narrative. We need to be the ones to set our agenda. I'm talking from a Pan-African angle and Uganda. The role of the media can never be underplayed. There has to be a lot of engagement with all stakeholders so that we can agree and be like the English Premier League. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joe Chigozi. A round of applause for Mr. Joseph Chigozi for those amazing responses. And of course, we shall be moving now to a journalist, a practicing journalist, Solomon Sirwanja. We've heard from the Honorable Dr. Monica Msenero. We've heard from the Deputy CEO. And now we can have an active journalist to give his insight. Solomon, you're welcome.
Thanks for having me. Like Joe said, we sell airtime, so every second counts. I'll make mine under 1 minute, and kindly you'll allow me leave the stage because I had another engagement. But I'll just give my insights. Dr. Musenero asked, why is the media negative? Maybe it goes back to define what journalism is. What are we taught in our journalism school? What is news? And that goes through the whole value chain of us, the practicing journalists, the editors, the producers, and certainly the public. If you were an editor and I came back with this story about, like from the innovations that we saw here, perhaps an eco stove. Ugandan develops an eco stove, and I brought it into the newsroom, and we are all competing for space. We are talking about a bulletin of 30 minutes where we've had parliament passing and debating some bills. We have police press conference, we have a riot in Chiseka Market, we have all these stories, and I'm being practical here. And I come with this story, Ugandan develops an eco stove. How many of the editors would take this story as number one, for example? In our headlines tonight, Ugandan develops eco stove. For the journalists here, how many of you would take that as your story number one? And they're in this room because this is a journalism panel. I can see Timothy Chitimbo there, I can see all the reporters here. If you were an editor here, would you take that as a story number one? I mean, Maurice Mugisha is here. He has been leading a team in the editorial front and now in the managerial front. Many of us wouldn't. Would have started, of course, I'll tell you the running order. Riot in Chiseka Market, Parliament passes this bill, police engages NUP, and then perhaps that would come in as maybe the last story in the second segment, and maybe we could even put it for tomorrow lunchtime bulletin. Tomorrow's lunchtime bulletin, we'll slide it in there. In journalism school, we are taught about what news is. News is controversial. News is man bites dog. News is all the elements of news. So do we need to go back to rethink and redefine what really news is or what really journalism is? Perhaps we could start that conversation there. But let me speak to the innovations and what the media can do real quick. I had an honor of visiting the Uganda Virus Research Institute about 2 weeks ago, and I was fascinated by what was happening there. Right from talking to Professor Pontiano Kalebo, who is still, of course, working on the vaccine, and they're now going into clinical trials. I was really fascinated by the equipment there, but by the science there. And I remember we had a professor. I need to tell you that many of the people who work at the Uganda Virus Research Institute are scientists and are professors. So they were telling us about, using all the terminologies, the hard virology language, And I was telling her, Mom, can you speak English? You're speaking French. I don't understand what you're saying. And I think this is common to many scientists, that when you're telling us about your innovation, your research, you're publishing papers, you're like speaking to fellow scientists. We never went to medical school. Please speak it. Speak the language that we understand. Help us understand it to the tiniest detail that this is actually what I mean, right? When you're telling us about the biology, the chemistry, biochemistry in there, please break it down for us. But also I think that what we can do is come up with a science desk. Journalists who have been trained to understand science and technology. But what we normally do is when we are assigning people, we get on the general desk. Who is around? Can you go and cover Uganda Virus Research Institute? Tomorrow, can you go to Musenero? She has a press conference. The next day, so we use the general desk to actually cover. And so we do not have a desk that is really grounded in the science and in the technology to come and write a story with deeper nuance and understanding for that story so that we can actually get to know it. And the challenge or the problem with that is that when you send me, who is on the general desk, to come and listen to your science, I might miss the story. And I'll say, what are these people saying? What story is there? And indeed, there is a story because perhaps there's the latest innovation, there's the latest science. But because I've not been grounded, I will not look at that as a story. Because then I'll just say, there was no story whatsoever. So I think that we need to rethink about our newsroom, the journalists, in terms of their training in understanding technology and science. I think that will really go a deeper way. My last submission on this is that, guys, the media and indeed innovations in the media space are changing. We're talking about augmented reality, virtual reality, artificial intelligence. And I know that many people in the media space are pushing back on artificial intelligence, but it's a runaway train. We're now telling ChatGPT to do a script for us. In fact, they have now come up with voices. So AI develops the script. There is a voice. There's even a Ugandan voice, Nigerian accent, English, the American accent. And then there is software that just does the editing. You just throw all the footage and it comes up with a story. And that means that the work of a journalist has been taken. The work of a video editor has been taken. The work of, we're almost having news anchors. I was doing the bulletin at the BBC the other day, and there's no cameraman in the studio. They are using robots. Technology is here. We cannot fight it. We just need to embrace it and actually integrate it into our journalism if we are to push the journalism space forward. Thank you for listening to me. I beg to leave kindly.
Solomon,
Yeah.
Before I let you go, there are key issues that you did tackle that I would want you to respond to before you step out. The first one was on the question of Mr. Joe Chigozi, which he hinted on about patriotism, mainly Pan-Africanism. It's a question of priorities. You have a country that you want to promote as a journalist, but then you have a story to tell. How do you counter that? The other issue was on the institution of the newsroom. We're here to find solutions. You talking about the institution of the newsroom being reorganized or re-looked into to see that the allocations are made in the proper manner. What solutions would you provide in that direction?
Let me speak about patriotism versus journalism. Let me make it categorically clear. We are not PR people. We are journalists. And I don't want to brush around patriotism. We are journalists. Ours is to tell the story. But we also have a responsibility to our public in terms of how do we tell this story, what are the dominant frames that we want in this story. I'll be honest with you, if there is a good innovation, and I have seen that the times are changing. I saw when the Uganda Virus Research Institute did the clinical trial, I think that Charles followed up years ago when they came up with the gel. You remember the gel? The clinical trial that we had with the gel for the HIV. I remember the way we framed the story was hope feds as jail science results like didn't come through. Basically, the way we portrayed it, and I think it's you, Charles, who said that even when it's good research has been done, it's not bad. It gives us a way forward. When this research is done, let us know. There's so many things I saw in that when Dr. Museno, you're telling us, we don't know. We don't know. So how do we actually let the media know that there's a guy who is working on a plane there? That there's a guy who is actually doing all, we just saw today that there's a Ugandan who is assembling computers here, made in Uganda. That's fascinating, but how many of us knew? So how do we get the media itself, first of all, to appreciate that these innovations are happening, but also pick interest? But I need to emphasize that we must find the news value, the news worthiness. I know that there's a bit about patriotism, but what really informs us is the news values and the news ethics. If a story does not have that news value, how am I going to tell the editor? So we need to also bring the editors on board, because as I've said, I'll bring a story from the field that Ugandan innovates an eco stove. The editor may not see the news valueness, and he says, you know what, I'm not here to do PR, I'm here to do journalism. But let me also speak about the other thing about how do we actually reshape the structure of the newsroom to be more tilted towards covering science and technology. Like I've told you, one, there must be a deliberate effort to come up with a desk that really is anchored in reporting on science and technology, so that we just don't get anyone on the general desk to cover science. We must have a person who understands what microbiology is, what virology is, and therefore can come and report accurately with some deep nuance in that.
Oh, thank
but
you,
also
thank you.
we must dedicate resources, so to speak, to support these science reporters to cover science.
Thank you very
for
much,
having me.
Solomon Serwanja, for those key points that you've noted out. I'll give Mr. Joe Chigozi to respond to a few of those issues that have been aired out.
Thank you, Solomon. Unfortunately, he's leaving. I'll see you, Solomon. Solomon raises something very interesting. When Cheptegei won, made the world record, are you aware that some Ugandans were not happy? Yeah. Some Ugandans were not happy. So my point is this: whereas a newspaper in Germany, in the US, will make it front page, here it will be back page. What does that mean? Is Cheptegei worth a story? Of course. So for me, where I sit from a management point of view, I think there has to be a deliberate effort. It's not that media should do PR, but as a country, we are as good as the media we have. There's supposed to be a narrative that is supposed to be pushed as a country. I can give you relentless examples. The truth is, journalists must decide on what is a good story, the editors and all that. But as owners, as managers of the media, if we must change the narrative, we must be deliberate on good things that are happening in the country to make front page or to be the leading stories. I'll give you an example. The kind of content we create, we've talked about the Hall of Fame, the Science Hall of Fame. If that story is not told, who is going to tell it? Someone will come from BBC and tell that story, and they will distort it. Probably they'll say there's something that wasn't done. You get it? So as we work together to build the country, the media is the fourth estate, whereas we need to report on there's a negative bit of it, but where is the positive? Where is the positive? Because we are creating a generation. You see, the thing about the media, it's like a drug. What you put in the minds of the people is what they are going to take. It is as simple as that. So if you do a lot of negative stories, even when they are positive stories, there's going to be a problem. So the role of the media is to shape the narrative, is to make sure that if Uganda has talent in terms of technology, we need to be able to create that content and put it at the forefront. Because if we don't,
Someone else is going to do
someone else is going to do it, and they will not do it the way we should do it.
Thank you very much,
So thank you.
Joe Chigozie, for those insights. Now I invite Maurice Mojisha. He has been a news manager before, so from that context, perhaps he will be responding to some key issues that have been raised both by Solomon Sirwanja and Joe Chigozie. Maurice, you can take the mic.
Thank you very much, Elijah. I'll keep mine shorter than Solomon. He said 1 minute, but went on to speak for 5. So I really want to appreciate, first of all, the Ministry of Science and Technology for this week's Science Week. It's exciting to start with the wall of, the wall of fame. And I like what Dr. Msenero did by taking us through that history. I think that for me is a start, and we need to start telling our story. The problem has always been who is going to tell the Ugandan story. And now the statement would be who is going to tell Uganda's science journey. Because a lot of us think innovation started recently. But listening to Dr. Msenero earlier, it's very clear that we had a lot of people who have set the path for where Dr. Msenero is and all the other scientists in this room. And I really want to appreciate the ministry for telling us that story and beginning to shape the narrative. I think let's start there. Secondly, I did approach the Ministry of Science, and this was before Dr. Msenero joined, I think in 2019, on providing a platform for the ministry to profile innovators on the national broadcaster. So now I want to bring back the offer to Dr. Msenero, because this was the conversation we had, and I think we asked the ministry at that time, and Brenda was there in that meeting, to share with us, what would be the typical concept note for this program. And we wanted to look at, do we create a 24-minute program every week that profiles the different innovators we have across the different sectors in the science space, whether it's just the pathogen economy or mobility. It didn't matter where we were, but we wanted to tell our innovation story and provide airtime every week that would be dedicated to the Ministry of Science and Technology. And we ran through the numbers. It was a bit pricey. We were not charging the ministry for the airtime. We were asking the ministry to manage the production of the content. And so that's the only cost you're going to have. The only cost you need to budget for, Dr. and Honorable, is the production cost. I totally want to agree with Joe and Charles. I think the challenge has always been, how do we contextualize the science? A lot of journalists, and this is really unfortunate for Uganda, we have a very high turnover of journalism in Uganda. So the average journalist in Uganda has probably been in the newsroom for about 3 years, 3 to 4, 5 years. You will find very few journalists who have been in the newsroom for more than 5 years. Even when they have become good at what they are doing after 3, 4, 5 years, and we think they are good enough to maybe develop the skill into a specialized industry like sciences, because you can tell that this young gentleman or lady is really good in health reporting. And so you start building capacity there. But in the 3rd year of their specialization, they're taken up either by the Ministry of Science and Technology or by the Ministry of Health, or they're actually employed by the WHO or any of the UN agencies that deals with the sciences. And so we don't have journalists that stay in the business for too long. And that's very unfortunate. Even the very few that we keep become editors, or they are quickly made editors on the desk, and that kills their journalism career immediately. So what we need to do as an industry, and I'm glad Dr. Nahabwe will speak last, is that either under NAB, which is the Association of Broadcasters, or even as media owners and the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance, we need to agree, first of all, that there needs to be a threshold of how we can pay journalists in this country. Because it isn't enterprising enough, it isn't paying enough, it isn't attractive. Charles, journalism isn't attractive in this country. And so if you have a good journalist like Solomon, even at Next Media, he feels like he's not getting enough. So he has to get out and find his own source of employment. And I think that kills our journalism career. So we don't build the capacity we need that is able to tell the story of our innovation and science journey. Now, if you don't have the quality of journalism you need, then you cannot get the quality of the stories that we need to tell out there. So I think we need to find some sort of platform where we can discuss this. And I know we've been discussing this for a long time, but it's a long way to go. And finally, for me, Joe talks about being deliberate. I totally agree. As a national broadcaster, we've decided that supporting the ministries and departments and agencies of government in telling the Ugandan story should be our priority, because we need to tell the Ugandans what is happening in government. There's a lot of great stuff happening in government. The ministry, when you listen to Dr. Msenero speak on a lot of our platforms, and you listen to what they're already doing as a Ministry of Science and Technology, and if you gave Msenero a platform every day, she would never even find enough time to talk about every innovation that is underway in this country. I think we need to be deliberate to tell these stories and find the platforms and find the young people where they are. Joe says they're on TikTok. Let's find them. Dr. Msenero, let's find a young group of people like Elijah who can tell our young people what we are doing on TikTok, on Snapchat, on X, on Telegram, on Instagram, wherever it is that we can find them, but be able to, first of all, produce the content in the manner in which it can easily be consumed, which if it's on TikTok must be very interesting and must be done in a way that is interesting. And Dr. Msenero, if we do that, then we will make science very sexy. I have a daughter who is interested in doing sciences. I am a son of a medical doctor, so I understand the business, but I did not join that field. So can we make it interesting and sexy enough to attract as many young people to understand what you're doing in your industry? But I really want to appreciate what the ministry is doing and for bringing us together to at least listen and understand what you're doing as a sector. So thank you so much. And Elijah, I will also run away. I have another engagement, but feel free to ask as many questions. Nahabwe and Joe will answer these questions ably.
We're here to conclude the panel. Thank you very much, Morris Mujisha, for those insights. A round of applause for Morris. And for the record, I'm not a young man. Neither am I stunted. I'm just fit. So, Dr. Innocent Nahabwe, you can take the microphone now, and you'll be responding particularly to the ever-evolving media spectrum in Uganda and how best it can be utilized. We know Galaxy FM has been very pivotal on their social media platforms and other mainstream media platforms, but the question is more on the content. What content and what's the procedure of receiving it? Thank you.
I think now I can hear you. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I know since there are political people here, the protocol is important, but I will break the protocol because the Honorable Minister was actually my lecturer teaching us virology about 2002. That's long ago. And she was a good lecturer that when we meet, she does not chase me around, much as I dodged most of the lessons. My name is, like I've said, is Dr. Innocent Nahabwe. I'm a veterinary doctor, so there are 3 vets here, and I understand why. To do vets, you must be very intelligent. Because what the medical doctors do on one animal, which is a human, for us we have to learn the human, the dog, the cat, the snake, and the insects. And it's never too easy. So very few people make it, and those who make it are very, very intelligent. So I'm pleased to be on the same stage with the doctor, the Honorable Minister, Dr. Msenero, and Dr. Charles Wendo, who are also vets. Now, about how the media can actually help promote this. First of all, I'm one of those who used to write, but who was also from the science background. And whoever is in here, we have seen a lot of journalists going back to do law because they found it important to report better on law, and so they have gone to do law to be a better. There is one area which would be very important for you if you are here and want to be different, because everybody is looking for what is different. Everybody is looking for what can make you money. If you're here and you think you want to be different in the newsroom, you don't want to be the one who they have to choose whether to send you to parliament or to police or to the riots. If you want to be different, kindly, if you're young and you're able to think about this, kindly consider joining being a science writer. And there are people here who can help you write these stories, like Dr. Wendo and others. So consider it, because it will put you aside. I have met Dr. Wendo in so many fora, and he will be the only science writer that is available to do this. So you will find him at AIDS Commission, you'll find him in IVR, in CDC, and all these things, because there are few of those. And all of us as professionals, we are often supposed to be looking for where do we be different? Where can we be the different one? So I think it is an important way to distinguish yourself and stand out and and it is possible. The other option is, of course, for those who are scientists, to understand that it's also possible to cross over. Just like people are going to do law, people are going to do other courses and doing MBAs, it's also important that we understand that you can be from the science area and you cross over, just like when Dr. Wendo did, and you find a way to be able to report our things. It would be a lot easier if scientists are writing about science. It becomes a lot harder when somebody who right from senior one thought biology was hard, and now finally you are sending him to a scientific conference to report about the scientific discoveries from a scientific conference. That will be very, very difficult. So it is very important that we actually find doctors, nurses, engineers that then can cross over and start writing. And for those who cross over, what can make it exciting and gets to the news? I have been involved in trying to change the way news gets reported successfully. These days when Miss Uganda comes, Miss Uganda is on the page 1 of any newspaper. That wasn't always the case. The actual pageants used to happen and nobody would care. But around 2001, 2002, I used to work for a newspaper called The Red Pepper. And we made the lighter news very important. And as such, those stories made it to page 1. Later, HIV stories used to be reported in journalism, in medical reports and scientific reports. Everything HIV would die there. And at Red Pepper, we realized that every time we wrote about HIV, new drugs, new innovations, new preventive measures, our sales almost doubled. You know why? Because we wrote it in a way that they understood. We made it a bit controversial. So we looked at the controversial elements, and we also made it very simple. And all of us, if there is something people always do, they always eat, but also eat at night. And we know that because of that, people are very scared of what might happen when they eat at night. Now, because it mattered, and we made it look like it matters to people, people were interested in that news, and it made page 1. And as of now, Dr. Charles Wendo will tell you that if you write a story about HIV and treatment of these diseases, it will most likely make page 1, simply because, first of all, it matters. 2, eventually now people are interested in innovations and things that progress there. So how do we then move forward? I see 3 things. One is Morris called it making it sexy. Science, sexy. We know sex sells. Even when they're trying to sell a very cool car, they apply a nice woman. It's sexist, yes, but it sells. So we need to find, in all the things that we actually do, how can we make it fun? I want to applaud the Ministry of Science, that we are talking about science in an environment like we are in. Nice glasses, nice tents, and not behind in a lab with dirty environment. This is part of that process, and I can assure you most people will come again and again and again. Simply because we are not in a dirty room that is scary, we make it look like it's nice. So this is one way of making it sexy. 2, some of the innovations, we need to then consult communication experts and find a way to make them right, to make the stories come through. When you listen to the stories of Steve Jobs, of Mark Zuckerberg, of the other innovators that have come up with nice products, they have come up with some story that doesn't come from the time when they actually made the innovation, but comes from the period when they maybe thought about the idea. That maybe Steve Jobs was an orphan who was given up at birth, and nobody wanted to do anything with him. And he struggled through school, but he liked some science. And then he was able to then eventually come up and do a product that eventually came through this. And all his launches for Apple products, it was not about gadgets and machines and equipment and big things, but cool, nice things and a very good story. So when I was moving around, I imagined the stories that would come out of here that would actually make page 1. The gentleman who stopped in P6, that is actually trying to come up with a solution that he can make a flying machine, I won't say plane. Solomon and his team, who are making pads out of banana fibers. All of us know the best we can make out of banana fibers was a banana fiber ball. But how can we then make pads, and we know how many people drop out of school because of those sanitation issues? Making that story and packaging the story by an expert, somebody sitting down with him, understanding the story, and then framing their story perfectly, that eventually anybody will then find that story compelling. Because clearly, there are some stories which have caught people's eyes, like Professor Mulanga, and we have to applaud her with her banana story. And the president will talk about it every independence. Reason is, she managed to frame the story perfectly well, and now eventually it has seen the attention. But do you know how many stories are out there and they are dead? We need to be able to create a platform where all these stories then come together and eventually are told. I don't have a whole day, so I'll try to wind up. So I think 1 is, this is a positive step and shouldn't stop. 2, we need to make science cool. I wish this was in the holidays and we could be able to invite our kids. And I don't think the PRI is enough because these are amazing things, but I'm not surprised people are not stepping all over each other the way they go for showgrounds, where buses and buses of people, ferry people all over to come and see the amazing things here. But beyond the amazing things which are here, we need to create a platform where all these amazing stories in the village can come. I can tell you I grew up not taking any Panadol or chloroquine or whatever because my grandmother had a remedy for everything. For malaria, there was a bit of something that everybody, for flu, there was something. Now we have, yes, Professor, the one of Covidex, Guang, but there are many like that. How can we be able to do that? So a platform for that. We also need to find a way as the science ministry on how to encourage, maybe recruit and encourage people to help make these stories and have a library or resource where our people who cannot understand these things go and make it very easy for them to understand. And that's three. Like I said earlier, we need to encourage our science people to tell their story. Because you don't want to die with your idea. A lot of us say, if I tell my story, somebody's going to steal the idea. The worst place that a lot of ideas are dying is in the cemetery. Because a lot of ideas are out there, People keep them and hold them very close to their chests. But nobody is interested in them, nobody is funding them. So how will those ideas ever come to light? It's like having meat and then you hide it away from fire and then hope that magically it's going to happen. There is an Acholi saying, I don't know how to speak Acholi, but it says that a very good, sweet-mouthed butcher, the person who sells meat, but he's very good at saying things and framing things, can actually sell you the behind of a cow, and then you'll go and buy it because essentially it's the worst part you would probably not buy, but because of the way he has said it. So I encourage every scientist that is in here to find ways in which to frame their story and make that story cool and make it sexy and bring it to us or invite us and find a way to make these stories actually get out there so that you can be able to be financed, so that you can be able to attract some attention from donors and maybe to get help, because sometimes you might have an idea but you cannot complete it. Thank you, and I look forward to more things like this, and I hope this keeps going, not just a one-off like many things we have seen, but it keeps on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nahawe, for those very beautiful insights. Another round of applause for Dr. Nahawe. Yes, without taking more of the time, I'll open the discussion to our audience such that they can as well and engage with the panelists. We started with 5 guest panelists, and now we have 3. So I'll open this discussion such that those that have questions and would like to interact with the panel today can actually raise them and they will be responded to. If you can have the microphone move around, those with questions, you can put your hand up and we'll start this discussion from the audience side. 1, 2. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Your name and the question. And maybe you can direct it to the panelists you'd like to respond to it.
Thank you very much. My name is James Onono. I'm the communication officer for Gulu University, but very interested in media. First of all, I thank Dr. Musenero because the media has been underlooked in this country. Is on record that few government officials will really recognize the importance of the media. But having this engagement is a plus for her. My question, unfortunately, some of the panelists have gone. Maurice Mugisha made a very stunning contribution that journalism in Uganda is not attractive. Probably that's why Elijah is also a strategic communicator now. Probably why I'm at the university communicating from the university instead of having been in the field. So maybe now to the minister herself, how can we make journalism attractive? Because this is reality. People are writing story for 5,000, for 10,000, and they might not tell the quality story, as Maurice Mugisha said. One of the person I wanted to ask has gone away, but all the same, to say we are not PR for our country, for me is really underlooking Uganda, because if it is a country issue, then where is the media house situated? And what is your strategic alignment, personally, as the media house and as a person? Because if the media house is not interested in promoting Uganda's agenda, then what agenda are you in? So before any agenda, Uganda should be first. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that question. Unfortunately, most of the people that these questions were being directed to are not on this panel. We shall take another one person, then I'll have the panel see if they can respond. Then we shall have another set of questions. Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon. My question is, I'm Gabriel Adusa, and my question is quite related to what he just asked. The speakers have talked about the symbiotic relationship between the media and the innovations that are taking place. Now, so the success of this whole innovation depends on the media, because the information has to get to the people. So my question is, having recognized that, can the minister confirm to the media that there is a deliberate policy to integrate them in the process of making this Science Week a success? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We can have these questions being responded to. I think I'll start with Mr. George Chigozie, if you have responses to the first person that asked questions.
I think, of course, journalism is a calling, just like any other profession. And I know that people are talking about, you know, underpay. I think this happens everywhere in the world. You know, you are paid because of value. If you do a good story, you will be paid. Of course, at Next Media, I don't think we pay badly. We try, I can tell you, we are very deliberate on, you know, motivating journalists. But motivation is not just even the money you pay, but the equipment. The equipment, the training, and all these things. And for me, that's critical. But that does not take away the fact that you want to be a good journalist. You want to be a good journalist. That's the beginning. I want to make a mark. I want to specialize in innovation science reporting. That is not money. That is intrinsic motivation. And this is, for me, the calling to young people. There's a huge opportunity around it that you can actually do stories today that can earn you a lot of money. And this is very practical. Does it say that, yes, the ministry, of course, we need to invest in content creation. One of the most difficult things is the cost of content creation. Doctor talked about the stories. To develop a documentary about Musa Bode, for example, we have to go to his home, isn't it? We have to visit endless people who can tell the story. Now, that's where we are calling upon the ministry to invest in those areas. Invest in training for journalists to appreciate the opportunity there lies in science reporting, but also invest in content creation, because this place looks amazing. But when the budget is being done for this Science Week, I think we need to budget for content creation. Airtime, we can accord airtime because we are Ugandans. We live in Uganda. But content creation is a cost. The journalist who is going to sit here the whole day, the story is not just here. The story is actually where these people came from. So we need to go back and reincarnate the story and tell that story. Just like I was telling someone that Elon Musk, according to stories, is autistic. That's the story. How can an autistic child become the best? That's the story. But someone had to dig deep into that story. But it costs money. So I would like to request the Honorable Minister that we are willing as the media to support this initiative. It's a no-brainer. Selling a country takes, the media takes the narrative. But there has to be investment in the people who are the journalists, training. The next Science Week should train journalists. There should be deliberate effort to train journalists year through, but also investment in equipment and the cost of creating this content. And I believe that's the way to go in terms of, I hope I've answered some of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Joe Chigozie, for those responses. There are very valid points there that you're making. And of course, I will have the Honorable Minister to respond to, there was a question that was directed to the Honorable Minister, Monica Msenero. You can respond to that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Elijah, and thank you all panelists for such a rich discussion. Let me begin by responding to these questions, then I will also make a comment. There was The question is, how can we make journalism attractive? I think, let me answer this question. How have we made science attractive? A few years ago, you didn't hear about science in this country. Many of you did not even know where the Ministry of Science was. It was there for 5 years, and many of you didn't know where it was. But actually, you have had a National Council of Science and Technology for close to 30 years, actually 30 years. So the issue is innovation. Innovation. How can we, sometimes I interact with young journalists and you feel a lot of empathy for them. But I think that we can innovate journalism. We can innovate journalism. The context has changed. The competition is high. A lot of stories you gather will already be on social media. Your editors will not be interested in them. Many journalists are paid when a story is done. And so they end up, reproducing most of the information on social media. And as we say, somebody is being paid a bit of 10,000 to write a bad story about Musenero. But what is the cost to the nation for that? So how can we make journalism attractive by giving journalism a clout, by making journalists become, if we had started earlier, I would have made a presentation. We define science as knowledge that has gone through a process of systematic collection, and the scientist is the person who possesses that knowledge. So in our definition of science, we don't talk about science being biology or science being chemistry, but any human being who collects information systematically about a particular subject and studies it and makes it relevant to a point of implementation. So we need to re-engineer journalism. For me, the journalists have stayed in a few years ago, but journalism has changed. And this is making it more and more difficult for you to practice. And that's what degrades it. Secondly, we need to make it relevant. Become very relevant. And that means saying no to many things. Sometimes we are saying yes to everything, to every story. And I want to appreciate a lot of the young journalists. I remember one time after a session at Parliament, I went to them and I said, why are you focused on negativity? And I started telling them, we are doing a lot of things and we're doing these things for you. We're doing these things to build a nation for you. I'm supposed to be retired. But so we are just working to make sure that you have a future. And many of them gathered around and said, but doctor, we don't know what you're doing. I spent about an hour. I told them what we're doing. And to this day, I have not seen just a story which has, which is just careless. So I think I also agree. We need to to interact with the journalists. We need to give them content so that their work makes sense. Because how will you write a story if you don't have the content? And as a ministry, we are going to, and we have actually started, and we started this by bringing Elijah on board so that he helps us to connect. And we also have our consultant in here, Mr. Henry Rugamba. Are you in the house? To guide us, to build us, because we are scientists and we can't really become journalists. Sometimes I'm talking and people are like, please help the scientist. I'm like, this is the language I know. I need an interpreter to interpret my language. So let's bridge the gap. Yes, we are integrating journalism, we're integrating media in science. And that's now we have a strategic communication, but we didn't go and get a professor or get somebody, a professor in journalism. We went for a practitioner who understands and knows the journalists and speaks their language. And as he sits with us, he begins to pick what we are saying and he asks for clarifications so that we can now begin to build. I cannot emphasize the issue of patriotism, because sometimes when we do negative communication, it's like you're sitting on a branch and you are cutting the branch. When that branch falls, you'll fall with it, because you're seated on the other end, but you're cutting it. Unless we are able to promote and package and build this nation, we will always be complaining. And yet we could all come together and build the nation. So we I would love to sit down with a team of people and discuss how do we re-innovate journalism. And now I said I will ask a question, and this is the elephant in the room: social media. It's an elephant in the room. It brings a lot of opportunities, but also brings a lot of challenges, especially as I come from government side, but I don't think from government only on our side. We really know what to do with social media, given that Uganda wants a liberalized media. We would like the media to be able to speak the truth. But when social media focuses on untruth, then that becomes a big challenge. What advice would you give us as government? How to handle social media? Because mainstream media can go as, they have said that, we needed to focus on Uganda first. What about social media? And mostly Uganda and social media, because most of the social media which is in the country is managed by us as Ugandans. Thank you.
And a round of applause for Honorable Minister's response. We shall have another set of questions. 2 people, very particularly 2. As we conclude, make your question very clear in one line. We shall be having a press conference just after this.
Okay, thank you. This is Enid Kawala from Busitema University. Maybe my question goes to the CEO or Assistant CEO for Next Media. Recently, we participated in the International Conference on Infection Prevention and Control, and I'm proud to, I was one of the Africans selected or nominated for a big award, and I was happy I was the 3rd worldwide and first in Africa. So when I reached out to Next Media through the Vice Chancellor of Busitema University, this is an award that would motivate other young scientists and researchers to really do something, or, motivate them to do more research and the like. But when we reached out to Next Media services, they kept on sending us to their correspondents within the region, that is Eastern region, in Mbale. We reached out to Matembo and the group. So they were telling us that is news. So I wish to ask, what is news to Next Media? Do you have a checklist? Because Honorable Diana Twineto gave me the same thing, told me, talk to this person. I talked to the person, they told me that is not news. But the Minister of Health thought it was important for us to really bring it out. Uganda being represented, and you stand out, with such a big award. Is that news? NBS guys were like, it's not news. So what is news, and do you have a standard checklist?
Thank you for that question. It will be responded to in due time. One last person.
Thank you, sir. My question goes to Mr. Chugozi. We are a small
Your name,
startup.
please?
My name is Maureen Nice. We are a startup, an SME that manufactures cosmetics from herbal material. We use plant science. And my question is about partnerships. As media, we all know we need the media to be able to reach our customers and how the media influences that. So my question is, are there resources or platforms or opportunities that small SMEs or startups can partner with big industries like Next Media? And if they are, do you have examples of such collaborations that have been successful? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question and those questions. I'll have Mr. Jochigozi respond because we need to split these questions so that we don't so that we can have an active panel responding to these questions. Mr. Jochigozi, you can respond to the questions. I'll have the same questions being responded to by Dr. Nahabwe with a different perspective, perhaps. Thank you.
Of about 400 staff. And you have so many journalists. And I'm not here to defend that journalist who decided that that's not news. But I think that's part of the issue, the mindset. If, for example, a journalist would write a bad story for 10,000 shillings, that's not money, it's integrity. Why would you write a bad story about someone because someone has given you money? Or why would you not take a good story because someone has not paid you? We have a policy at Next Media. We don't charge for stories. We don't. If it's a good story to run, probably you talk to the wrong person. We have chief news editors, we have bureau chiefs, we have all those people. But before I leave, please make sure you get my number. That story will run, I can assure you, because it's a good story. And I must say this, we've been very deliberate on things like that because it's the way to go. If you do not tell the Ugandan story, which story are you telling? These stories must be able to transform the communities that we work with. And I can assure you that story will run. But also, in terms of partnerships, you know the SDG number 17 talks about the new way of doing business, impactful partnerships. We are always open to young people who have ideas, who would like to be helped in terms of partnerships. We are doing a lot of them. I would invite you again to have a pitch. Of course, we receive so many of those, that I can tell you. But we have to decide which one to take on, and we are always very fair on who we partner with, as long as we have the same values, as long as you have impact. You don't need to pay any money for a partnership, because we both benefit. We will do the cost-benefit analysis, or we'll give you a value sheet and see how can we benefit from working with you. Is it a positioning partnership? Is it giving back to Ugandans? For example, we are doing a lot of partnerships with planting trees. We've embarked on a campaign called 15 million trees in 3 years, and we're encouraging every Ugandan to come on board. That is part of our sustainability model on how we can help not just individuals, but help the country. So we have a lot of these partnerships. So I'll employ you again to come and do a pitch to the team, and we'll be able to support you in the best way we can.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jochigos. Mr. Jochigos is formerly a spokesperson, so he can never run out of words. But I'll invite Dr. Nahabwe to respond to the second question as we conclude, in the interest of time.
Thank you. Somebody was asking, what's news to you? Ultimately, what is news is what's relevant to the person who is receiving it. What's news is what's near the person who's proximity, near the person who is actually receiving it. It's very important that whatever happens and we think is news, we need to address those things. How is it relevant to my audience? And sometimes we all want to go for one media house. But the news saturation and the way news is actually curated is through cycles. Next media might not pick it, maybe New Vision will. Maybe your small media outlet in Mbare will pick it, and once it picks it, the other outlets will actually pick on it. Even the news editor here might see it in another daily and pick it up. So sometimes it's good for you to pitch to as many people as possible for it actually eventually come through. And you'll be surprised at how eventually these people who told you it was no longer a story can actually eventually carry your story. About the issue of how can we make the media profitable. The problem is most of our people who come to do new journalism come with the mindset of they send me to a press conference, I come and tell the story. The people reporting on science need to think beyond that. For example, all these institutions, all these exhibitors here need somebody to put their story together. You have that opportunity as somebody who has done science, maybe in engineering or medicine or even other innovations in IT. They have a story to tell. If you're the person who stands out as somebody who can tell that story, beyond the newsroom, you would be sought after if you are the one going to tell the story of Musa Bode, going to be able to tell the story of Professor Egwang, and telling it differently. And eventually there will be people willing to buy these stories, Reuters, AFP, BBC, and others. So sometimes we need to think beyond our normal newsroom and say, how else can I be relevant? So that you prepare your story, not just for here, but for beyond, for you to have a YouTube channel that runs this and others. Lastly, to address the Honorable Minister and the issue of social media. The truth is, it's a new thing, but mainstream media still is relied on to provide a fact check for what is running in the grapevine. Even before social media came, people had rumors. They had Radio Katwe and others. But ultimately, people will always trust what has run on radio, in news, in newspapers, and on TV. So as people who are reading this scientific, really, I would say, revolution in trying to bring the science to the people, it's very important to find ways in which you can have media as partners. Maybe you can, if the budget does not allow, maybe reduce the number of tents or something. But because the news outlets, the media outlets are business enterprises. So if they were, for example, the people who are advertising and putting people to this event, they would be feeling compelled to cover the event as well, and can be among the things you demand from them. So it is very important as you do your budgets to say, how do I partner with these people? How would you spend some money with them? And in addition to that, then demand from the news owners to make sure they cover and give priority to things to do with science. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nahawe there, for those beautiful insights. We shall have parting shots from the Honorable Minister, but also from Dr. Charles Wendo as we do conclude. Honorable.
First, I just want again to emphasize how appreciative we are that we have all shown interest in this dialogue and this discussion. Appreciate all the journalists who have been waiting. Appreciate all the panelists who have been here. And if I can curate from what we have, what has really come out as consensus, first is that there is need for a deliberate effort and having platforms where scientists interact and dialogue and get to understand journalism and the media, so that we can build more understanding on both sides, so we can then have a supportive media. The second is that we need to put Uganda first. not every story, just because it will make some people laugh or it will make some people feel feel like they are winning. We really need to begin to separate science from politics. Science is standard. Science will always be science, whichever politician or whatever, but sometimes we are mixing that and we put in a lot of negativity. So we want to put Uganda first. How do we put Uganda first? That's something we need to work on through this year. Then we need to, what I have seen is that we need to attend to the state of the journalists and the journalism. Journalism is transitioning, and the journalists are trying to survive swimming in uncharted waters, and that's something that we need to discuss and see if we can come up with some solutions. The fourth issue is that we need some innovations. How do we innovate around this? How do the people who tell the story of what is of the nation, how can it transition? Because it's like now we are being pulled by the trends of the world. I have noticed a trend of dancing Africans, where you find even a mother getting involved in some funny dances for TikTok. And because people are trying to earn some money. Yes, you may dance. Yes, you may have your TikTok likes, but is what you're getting out worth it? Not just immediately, but for the future. And then STI will start these conversations. But Elijah, before we end, I would like to beg your indulgence. We have investors in the room. Before Dr. Wendo comes to wrap it all up, we have investors in the room. And to be good to hear their view. And if you could allow just 5 minutes for Kume to make some remarks on the side of investors. What would be important in media? What would be crucial for us?
The microphone, please.
To focus on as we build this relationship with media. Because you can do so much, but unless the media tells it, and tells it well, it is not going to bear the results that we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Thank you, dear panelists. From the point of view of an investor, investment is all about capital formation, going into a place that gives the highest returns with the lowest risk. I repeat that again. Investment is about capital formation, going into a place that gives the highest returns with the least or lowest risk. Now, why do I say that? It's because investment and valuation is based on perception. And that's where the media comes in. If you have negative stories, inaccurate stories, incomplete stories, and it trends online, an investor doing due diligence first goes online to do preliminary desktop assessments on the value of what you're selling. And so if the media isn't deliberate and intentional about putting positive stories about the inventors, the innovators, the solutions, then it becomes problematic for an investor to pick Uganda as a preferred destination for their investments. Does that make sense? So the media has a really critical role to play in ensuring that they are shaping the narrative to attract investors. The difference between a child in Kampala and a child in Silicon Valley is just opportunity. The child in Kampala is probably smarter and well, and probably has a more grounded foundation, but lacks opportunity. And so, as investors, we are here to bring opportunity. We're here to create opportunities, create that platform for Africans to excel. But the media also needs to help us by projecting positive stories that helps us in our boardrooms when we're making investments, critical investment decisions. So, from an investor standpoint, yes, there is capital. Yes, there is the will. But the question is, are the people we're investing in, are they excited about the investment that's coming? I said this yesterday. I went to a hub called Start Hub, somewhere in Kampala. Very, very exciting things going on there. It's in this very, very small alley. You would never think innovation ideas are being generated there. In the hundreds. And for me, this is day 2 here, but for me, I feel like I'm already fulfilled, having met a lot of very interesting innovators and inventors in a very small room. And I told them this. I said, listen, when I invest, or when I encounter Ugandans to invest in them, it's never in Uganda. I invest in Ugandans in Nigeria. I invest in Ugandans in Kenya. It's almost like when a Ugandan has a good idea, they must export it out of their country to another country to gain investments. And so I was very deliberate when I met the Honorable Minister that we should tell these stories here in Uganda, not outside of Uganda. So the media has a really critical role to play in ensuring that you create an enabling environment, a positive environment, a conducive environment for investments to thrive. So thank you very much. The Ministry of STI is doing so much to be able to place the country at an advantage position for investment. It's all about innovation for the nation. I got that from the Honorable Minister today. And I think that's the mantra we should be singing, innovation for the nation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those nice insights. That gentleman is an investor. I hope, sir, you can also invest in me. I'm an innovator at the end of the National Science Week. Yes, thank you very much. Well, as we close, since we're running out of time, I'll invite Dr. Charles Wendo to give the parting shots and the press lounge. You're welcome, Doctor.
Thank you. Thank you again, Joel. The Honorable Minister already did a very good wrap-up, so I will not attempt to repeat the wrap-up, but I would just like to very quickly respond to a few things that were said earlier. One, just two or three things. One, I didn't want us to get out with the impression that negative news sells more than positive news. That is not true. Much as I said, my bachelor's degree was in veterinary medicine. I've experience in the media over 20 years, and all of my postgraduate studies were in mass communication. And up to now, I read scholarly work on mass communication and journalism. I have not seen any convincing, conclusive evidence that it is bad news that sells. My observation is that what matters more, whether you're reporting bad news or good news, what matters more is what we call in the media angling. What particular angle do you focus on, and not whether the story is good or bad. I will give a very quick example of when I had a front page story on a science story on front page, when other journalists thought there was no story. I reported on, there was a workshop going on in Entebbe, an international workshop on conservation on chimps, and other journalists got out and said, there is no story. These guys are talking about boring stuff on chimps. And then I picked out something and I carried out further interviews, and I was able to establish that the chimps at the sanctuary had been placed on contraceptives. So when I came back to the newsroom and I told my editor that the chimps have been placed on contraceptives, the editor said, wow, bring that story very quickly. While other journalists went out and saying, these guys are talking about boring chimp stuff. So it's not about whether it's a good story or a bad story, it's about how we angle the stories. And Honorable Minister, if there's an opportunity, now this is an area that calls for training. If there's an opportunity, I am happy to deliver a training session on how journalists can get an interesting angle out of from a science story. Then the other issue was the issue of little pay, and journalism is not interesting. That actually is true. We talk about the low pay all the time. But again, it's about how innovative can we be. Again, this is an area that calls for training. There is opportunity for anyone who knows how to write a great science story. Instead, what we see is a shortage of people who know how to write a great science story. But for those that are able to do a good science story, I am yet to find a journalist, a science journalist that knows how to do a good story and is not able to earn a living. There are many different ways someone can earn a living. My own story, in my 20 years in the media, I never ever asked for a salary increase. And each time I got a promotion, it was an inconvenience because apart from the journalism, I would create time to do something else outside because the demand was so high. The international publications would want me to write for them stories. Scientists themselves within Uganda and outside Uganda would want me to help them with their work. They want probably to write content that is going to a non-specialist audience. They want you to help them with that, and so on and so on. So there is always a lot of ways that journalists can supplement their income if they know how to communicate science well. In fact, to me, every promotion at the workplace was an inconvenience because a promotion comes with increased workload, and then you don't have time to do the side things that you normally would do to make money. So learning the skills to do science journalism well is very, very crucial, and you do not have to have a science background. I know what I see in Europe and America, most of the science journalists there are scientists that studied journalism later. But in all over Africa, most of the science journalists that I see were not originally scientists, but they just decided to learn how to report good science stories, and many of them are doing really well. So a science background is great, but you do not have to have a science background to become a good science journalist. And then finally, Honorable Minister, on the issue of social media, again, this is one of the areas where I think we need to do a lot more, because the people who publish the wrong things are all over social media. And then the people who publish the right things are hardly visible on social media. It is an area where you can use the strategy that some people use, that to overwhelm the bad bacteria, you bring a lot of the good bacteria to destroy to overwhelm the bad bacteria. So it's something we can do on social media. Strategically plan to use social media in such a way that the good information overwhelms the negative information. So once again, thank you so much, Honorable Minister, and thank you everyone for being active until this time, and to my fellow panelists.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for our panel today, the entire panel, perhaps a standing ovation for them. They've really done a great job. I really want to thank the entire panel. Most of them, actually 2 of them, have left us. The guest panelist that we had was Mr. George Chigozi, the Deputy Chief Executive Officer at Next Media. We had Maurice Mujisha from UBC, the Deputy Managing Director. We did have Dr. Innocent from Galaxy FM, and also, yes, and also we had Dr. Charles here. And I also want to thank the Honorable Dr. Monica Musenero. As we conclude, we shall be having a press conference at the press lounge just outside. So I also remind the journalists that stay around for that press conference. We shall be taking a group photograph. I think the group picture will be down for for our panelists, but also those that would really want to have a photo moment with them. I think we can now all attest that I deserve to go in the World Book of Records for the man that stood for the longest hours. Thank you very much.
Let me welcome Harvard.
Journalists, there's a photo moment here with our panelists, please. After which, in front here. Just after which we shall be going for a press conference that will be conducted by myself, but it will be the Honorable Minister that will be briefing the media.
Let me keep your secret, yeah. Deepest of my heart is the safest place, so baby, turn to me and say, girl, I love your body. I panic when I see your body. I admire my baby's body. Hey, yeah. Baby, when you turn up on me, umutima kukupa nyo. You're the one that I hope. Everywhere you go, I go follow. Panicking and secret check. If it's the more heart is the safest place. So baby, turn on me and say,